Hi, so I'm Chuck Wolfe, and we're going to be talking with Vanessa Druskat today about her new book, and it's called The Emotionally Intelligent Team. Vanessa became quite well known when she and her colleague Steve Wolff got an article published in Harvard Business Review. No one has dedicated more time or more thought to what does it take for a team to become emotionally intelligent than Vanessa. I know Vanessa from what's called the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. And we've gotten to know each other because we attend pretty regularly. There are twice a year meetings of people from all over the world, really, researchers and practitioners who come and share their best innovative ideas and best practices. And Vanessa is also one of the people often with best practices, and this is one of them. I was delighted to have the chance to read her book that's about to be released, and I asked her if I could have the opportunity to spend some time with her to give her a chance to talk about her book. So the first, I'm going to just ask Vanessa if you would tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to write this book. And I'm actually going to do this twice. Also where people might buy it, and I'll ask you at the end to repeat it.
Sure, sure. So let me just check off the question of where you can buy it. You can go to my website that is vanessadruskat.com, and that gives you a whole bunch of options, places to go to buy it. You can also just go to Amazon or wherever you like to purchase your books. It's actually coming out on July 22nd next week, so in a week.
Could you also just tell us how you spell Vanessa? That sounds easy, and also
You bet.
Drusket.
You bet. You bet. Vanessa is Vanessa. Druskat is D as in David, RUS as in Sam, KAT.com.
Is it .com? Okay.
Yes.com.
Okay, great.
And so
Good,
thank you
good to
for
know.
asking me that, Chuck. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and to really share what the book is all about and the take that Steve Wolfe and I have on emotional intelligence. So, my background is in psychology. I have 3 degrees in psychology. Every one of them was focused on the connection between business and psychology. So, as an undergrad, I have a minor in business and focused on psychology. And then I did a master's degree in organizational psychology. And then I went on and did a doctorate in social psychology. And so, my interest all along has always been about people in groups. And that interest stemmed from my young work life. So I grew up in a farming community in Western Massachusetts, small town called Hadley. And my parents of some of my best friends owned farms. And so at the age of 12, I started working in the summertime on farms, picking cucumbers, picking asparagus, tomatoes, squash, you name it. I was out there on farms doing a lot of work. And what happened in those early days is I really enjoyed the camaraderie, the teamwork, if you will, of what happened on the farm. So we would help one another get better at the task, give one another feedback, have a lot of laughs together. And, the time went by very quickly. So fast forward, high school, I had a great experience in teams. I was an athlete in high school, had some great experience there. But when I got to the work world, everything fell flat. The teams that I was in there, my professional life, just were not the same. I didn't feel like people had my back. I went into the teams thinking, okay, I'm going to have everybody's back. This is the way it works. We're going to help one another. We're going to succeed together. But that's just not what happened. People started competing with one another. The leaders weren't very good. They would reward bad behavior, and it would just continue. For example, I was on one team for a while, and people could show up late. Nobody cared. We all have to pick up the slack over and over and over again. And things like that that really made me want to go back and get a deeper dive into what are the ingredients to a better team. And so that sort of started me on my quest when I went into my master's degree program and my doctoral program was with the intention of studying teams. And so that's the beginning. I met Steve Wolfe, who you know, who's also a member of the consortium that we both belong to. He was a friend of mine in graduate school, also interested in teams.
Oh,
And so we
interesting.
blended our interests. We had different backgrounds, different ways of thinking about it, but we blended our interests and started working together back in graduate school.
So you got to thinking about teams from the standpoint of being a person coming into a team, having an experience on a farm. I did, by the way, a little bit of gentleman farming on my own. I lived in Iowa for a few years out
Oh
uh,
yeah.
in farm country, actually, and but they were surrounded by dairy cows and beef cows and also corn and all it was. And if I learned to garden, so just all those
Yeah, you
stories about
told me about that
vegetables.
once. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
that and by the way, the people that were out in that community, everybody did share. There was a sharing. It does seem very quite different than my own personal experience in the corporate world as well. Because I before becoming a consultant, I'd worked for different companies, and it was quite different. Even working in schools, by the way, and even at Harvard Business School, I worked at for a short time. Um, People often are more competitive than
Yes.
collaborative, I found. And
Yes.
so some of the work in your book, I thought, really addresses that and why it seems so much better when you do feel like you have people that care about you. I did want to mention something else. In the very beginning of your book, one of the most well-known authors in our field is Dan Goleman. And Dan, who has written a lot about what a lot of people have found to be true in the world of emotional intelligence, talks specifically about how much he's learned about teams from you, from all the work that you've done going forward. And I thought that was significant. And one of the things that strikes me that was part of your book right from the beginning that really grabbed me was that um, sometimes you think you have to have superstars on teams. And you have a few sports analogies, and as a crazy Boston sports fan, I have comments about that afterwards I can tell you
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
But one of the thoughts that comes out of this is that you don't have to have superstars.
Yeah.
In fact, what's really interesting isn't about how talented the team members are. It's almost counterintuitive to me, and I wrote you about that. But you said that it's more about how people work together in terms of what they can produce as a whole group. And by the way, also, when does a group become a team is another big question. But the
Yes.
concept of it doesn't have to be highly talented individuals. It has to be more about the team systems and processes that are in place. So tell us about that and how that can be true.
Yes, you're really nailing probably the most important message in the book there, Chuck. Um, I'm not the only researcher who has talked about this or studied this. I can tell you about my own mentors. I can tell you about research that's been done at MIT and Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pennsylvania and at Harvard. All these top. So I reason I mentioned those fancy names like Harvard Business School is that this is great research, and the conclusion is consistently that a team of mediocre people with good processes that listen to one another, that have norms and routines that use the talent in the room, will outperform a team of geniuses working together more like a group than a team. And I'll say more about that in a second. But, where they're not building on one another's ideas, they don't have routines that allow them to collaborate effectively. So then the natural question is, can if you get a bunch of geniuses in the room and you teach them the collaboration skills, does that boost it even higher? And let me say this. Good luck getting a bunch of geniuses together in a room. There is evidence to suggest that you're really going to be great. But oftentimes with geniuses come egos, and it's hard to hire and hang on to that. And one of the things that we have found in my research and others find as well is that we focus too much on composing the perfect team. What you really need to focus on as a leader is building the interactions among your team members that bring out the best in one another. I mean, again, really using the talent in the team because we've known for years that good interactions that build on one another, really produce the success from teams. And that kind of success is far superior to what we can do alone. More work should be done in teams because we are so much smarter in groups than we are alone.
So that's a significant component. And then what your book is really highlights for me is the kind of systems that you put into place, and it starts with norms. And I remember years ago there was form. You got them together as a group, and everybody wants to make decisions collaboratively, and then all of a sudden we disagree, and then what happens? then we start to argue, and then we storm. We may break up. We may never get together, or we norm. We find ways to work together and to manage conflict. That's the way I think about it. And then
Mhm.
over time, if the norms work and we're still allowed to speak up, and that can be one of the norms that you talk about, how important it is to allow for disagreement and
Hmm.
conflict to emerge, because that's
Yes.
where creativity shows up. And then you perform. But you have a little different way of thinking about that. And the way you talk about norms is really interesting. So you want to say it's one of the key, I think, foundational points that you make in the book is the way you address and talk about norms.
Sure. So,
Right.
but norms really are the patterns of behavior in a team. So this is the way we do it here. I've been in organizations studying teams for 30 years. And typically what I do is I work with teams that do similar tasks, and I'll go from one team to the next. And the dynamics in the room, the way they interact is very different. And those norms, they stem from people's values, but they become habits. Norms are created early in the history of a team, and they become habits, and they become the way we work around here. What's normal in this team? They're relatively easy to change if you get the team involved in that kind of change. So one of our superpowers as a human being, and this is work that's done by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist at Northeastern University. She says over and over again that the key superpower of human beings is we can create the social context that meets our needs. Other animals are born with instincts, certain kind of context they create. We develop the social context we want, and that's what norms do. So anyway, my colleagues and I, including Steve, we went into organizations and we looked at really high performing teams and what we call average performing teams, or people doing the same tasks but not at the same, not performing as well. And we identified the norms, the habits, the routines that differentiated those that were the highest performing. And so those are the norms that are in the Team AI model that we've created. So we put that together. We spent, a good, I would say, over 20 years, 20 years putting together that model, checking it, tweaking it. And then we went out for 10 years and used the model to develop teams. And so we figured out, if you build these norms in teams, does it improve their collaboration? Does it improve people's sense of belonging and trust in the team? And does it improve their performance? And it turns out it does. And so once we finished that work, I came back and decided to write the book. Steve moved on to other things, and that's how the book emerged.
So the concept of norms for me are really interesting. A couple of quick examples. I wrote to you about one of them. Um, when I was, I don't know, I went out to Iowa. I grew up in New England, but I went out to Iowa, and the reason I went to Iowa was because they had it was for guidance counseling, and I was hoping to be the state of Iowa's first elementary school counselor. The goal of elementary school counseling wasn't to sit with one child at a time when you had 600 kids you were responsible for. It was to give away your skill set. If you had learned how to counsel effectively, then teach teachers how to counsel,
Sure.
teach parents how to counsel,
Yeah.
do it in large classrooms so kids learned about how to do it with each other. And it was a very proactive model. And Iowa, a lot of people think of flyover country in the United States as anything down on the coast isn't really doing a lot of interesting things. But Iowa's always had the Iowa test of basic skills. They were always a forerunner in education.
Hmm.
And the people that I work with, two lovely women, were way ahead of everybody else, and I got a chance to work out there with them. And I was working in that field on elementary school counseling, and it was a great opportunity. We tried to teach everybody how to do these skill sets, and people began to get it. And then I left because title money that was
Mm.
funding it ran out. It's a
Right.
longer story, but it ran out, and I decided I'm going to go back to school, and I got into Harvard, but the Graduate School of Education. But I thought I'm either going to become a superintendent and never let something like this,
Right.
not go
Right.
on
Go
with
to
the
waste
success we're
again.
having,
Right. Yeah.
or I was going to become a consultant. And I landed up going the consultant route and working at Harvard Business School. But I got from Harvard Business School to work in Exxon. Anybody who worked there came right out of school.
Mm-hmm.
They picked from the best schools, they picked the top students, and they paid the most money.
Mm-hmm.
They never had anybody leave Exxon for the same job for more money. It was
Yeah.
impossible.
Wow.
So they had that mentality of being the best
Sure.
at what they did. And so, but when I went there, one of the things that happened to me was I came in as a 30-some-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else was there from their 20s, early 20s mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss said to me, he called me in one day and he said, Chuck, I've been treating you unfairly and I'm sorry about that. And I said, what do you mean, Roy? And he said, well, I just see you as a 30-something-year-old person and assume you know what the norms are here. And you don't. You didn't grow up here. And some of the
Mm-hmm.
things that you've done or said are, conflict with the norms we have here. And I've been angry and upset. Even sometimes I haven't even told you about it. And I think that's so unfair of me. And I want to apologize to you. He was a great boss.
Yeah, I guess so.
But he also informed me, to your point, that I didn't know what the norms were. And I better stop paying attention because there were behaviors here that I mean, I sat in on the norms for the schools that I'd worked in. I even had the
Right.
chance to sit in on Harvard Business School, but that was the faculty, and those norms weren't the same as working in Exxon. And
Right.
I really had no clue about what everybody else just, when you first come in, people don't expect you to know and they coach you.
Right. Right.
But how do you find that? And one other really quick experience was I got promoted in Exxon and went to Exxon Office Systems. And Exxon Office Systems was a compilation of people from Xerox, from IBM, from digital that doesn't exist anymore, digital equipment,
Mm-hmm.
Data General doesn't exist anymore. A whole bunch of companies got thrown together because Exxon, very arrogant company, as good as it was,
Mm-hmm.
thought they could do anything and they wanted to go into high technology. In the
Mm-hmm.
oil business, you have years to make decisions. In the
Sure.
technology business, you got to
Right.
turn
Right.
on a dime. And they
Fascinating.
put all these people in, and everybody had their own norms from all these
Yes.
different companies.
Yes.
And it was like Houston, Texas felt like when everybody was moving down there because it was booming, and everybody had different road rules that they were following.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
people that might do something inappropriate with their hand out the window might get shot at by somebody from Texas. So it was norms were so much a part of my life that I didn't have any knowledge about when I first
Right.
went into these places. And
Sure.
that company just folded because they couldn't get out of their own way. Everybody had a different way of
Yeah.
thinking about what was supposed to
Interesting.
happen.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So norms to me, when I read about how important norms were to you, I thought, in my own life, they've really shown up and they've been very powerful. But you work with Richard Hackman. I had a chance to work with Richard too. He's one of the best people in the world about teams at
Mm-hmm.
Harvard University. And Richard came in and said to the chairman, because we were trying to get senior people to work more as a team. And all these
Mm-hmm.
senior people had all these
Sure. Sure.
responsibilities within their own
Yeah.
divisions or operations. And they felt like I'm going to work where I can because that's where I control it. I don't know what the rest of these people are doing.
Yeah.
And the CEO wanted more teamwork. And Richard came in and said, the only way you're going to get more teamwork, he said to our CEO at the time, he said, you got to change their bonus system so that you reward half of their bonus is going to be how well they functioned as a team member. And that did make some difference. And I'm curious because at the highest levels,
Mm-hmm.
when you want people to not be a group of just senior individuals, all part of a leadership team, how do you get them? Have you seen any success working across the tops of organizations in the work that you've done? Because you've done work with all kinds of companies, it seems like.
Sure. Sure. Yes, I have, and that's interesting. Can I just ask you when was that? When did Richard come in? Do you have a sense of the year? I'm just curious because I've known
Probably in
Richard
the
for many.
1980s,
Okay, yeah, okay,
probably
good.
mid 80s.
Okay, good, good, good. Because he actually had a graduate student test that theory, and about the bonuses, et cetera, et cetera. And it really did it really did play out if at
It
least
made
it
some,
improved
I
things
mean, it
somewhat.
didn't make all the
Yeah.
difference, but it definitely impacted people.
It definitely impacted, exactly. Um, so let me just build on what you just said and then say a little bit more about leadership teams. So yes, I had the absolute pleasure of working with Richard Hackman, and he was one of the first ones to talk seriously about the importance of team norms. And he really dove into that topic, and he included norms in his model of what a team needed to have to be effective. What he didn't do, and what we did, what we, as his student, one of his students, um, we went out and flushed out what kind of norms matter most. So that's how we sort of added on to what Richard did. Um, we have had luck with leadership teams. Now, here's the issue. Everybody thinks that leadership teams have it easy because you got all these, again, geniuses in the room, right? But you also have all these people who are highly achievement oriented and who are highly competitive. They wouldn't
Right.
be at that level if
Right.
they weren't good at competing, right? Weren't good at looking out for themselves. And so the big challenge there is pulling the team together to help them recognize what's the value added of working, of collaborating as a team. How can we help one another? And so the leadership teams that I've had the most success with have been those that are having problems and come to us. They say, we're not meeting our potential. Things aren't as good as we want. What can we do to improve? And then what we do is we institute norms that help them create norms where they're listening to one another better, where they're sharing more ideas with one another. I mean, they've all got great ideas that they're holding on to. If they shared them and coached one another with it, then it would improve. All boats would rise, and that's what you're aiming at, and that's what I've seen. But
Now
again,
you do a great job explaining those in the book, and I don't want to tell people everything in the book so they don't have to buy it. But
sure,
can you why don't you share a couple of norms that you found that were the things that did seem to matter, were significant, that you found really resonated with team leaders at
sure,
that
sure,
level for all the reasons you said make it hard.
sure, absolutely. So we have, by the way, I just want to say, first of all, it is absolutely critical that you have a shared mission, goals, clear roles in a team. We call these the team fundamentals. But what our research focuses on is, after that, because that alone does not make you, a high performing team. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that I'm not ignoring those intentionally. They do matter. But we basically have three categories of norms that we have found, three clusters of norms that really matter. The first one, we've come to label, we've tweaked things a little bit, but we've come to label this one how we help one another succeed, because that's part of what this set of norms. This is about helping the individuals in the team. So this is what links you to understanding the benefits for yourself of collaboration. Okay. The second cluster is about how we learn and advance together. So this one is about alignment. This one is about making sure everyone's included in making sense of the current situation. Everyone's involved in assessing how we're doing now and what we need to tweak as a team so that we're not static about our norms. We're not static about our routines and the way we do things, but we're checking in periodically and adapting to what the current needs are in the situation. And then the third cluster is about reaching outside, because what we find is, things can go wrong if you think of yourself as an island and that you've got all the skills you need. When you think you have to have a little humility, which can be tough for some teams, but you have to recognize that there's people on the outside with ideas, with information, that can help you reanalyze what you're doing, think more forwardly, anticipate what's coming down the pike a little bit better, and can help you really understand, what are your customers. One of the things that I see a lot in these leadership teams is that they forget that the people below them are their customers. You're working for the people below you. What do they need? What do they expect? What are you not giving them right now? And often what they're not giving them is an aligned view of the direction of the organization. So anyway, with regard to those three buckets of norms, what we find, we always assume we can skip that first bucket, which is about getting to know one another, signaling respect, giving one another feedback. You can't. That is fundamental. That bucket of norms where you find out more about one another, you learn more about how people make decisions, the kind of information that they have, that they want, what you've got in common with them, what's different about them. And you are willing to give them feedback and help them develop and learn, which is what happens in the great teams. And then of course that you are willing to demonstrably give them respect. So I can dive into each of those more carefully, but let me just say that when we work with leadership teams, if we don't start there, things don't take off. So one of the biggest interventions that we often use is one of these kind of tell us about yourself. We'll also often bring out postcard pictures or tools or things, and we'll give them a big piece of paper if we can have the luxury of having them all in the same room. And we have them answer questions by putting pictures up on the wall. Okay, so what is it that you most need from this team? What is it that you most fear in this team? What is something about your background that this team needs to know, right? What is it that you want the team leader to do differently? And they have to come up with pictures. They have to get out of their own heads and their own egos, and they put these up, and we share them. These folks at the upper levels of organizations don't like to waste time, but it breaks down walls. It's the kind of thing that broke down walls for Steve Jobs at Apple. So we know he had a team coach. So did Eric Schmidt at Google. So did, all these folks in the Silicon Valley. They all had a team coach. And this was one of the biggest things they did, that team coach did, was help them know one another, help them help one another more.
I don't know if you remember, Vanessa, there was a time when Dan Goleman was at the consortium meeting and he was talking about empathy. And I remember struggling with his definition because the empathy that most of us were aligned with was empathy means a couple of things. It means I feel what you feel. I emotionally actually feel the same feelings that you have. Not, I don't know why you might feel them, but I feel them.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is intellectually understanding what you feel and why you feel the way you do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
Dan said, but there's also caring about how you feel. That's more of a value judge, a value to
Mm-hmm.
me, that
Mm-hmm.
somebody might have.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, over time, began to think, I don't think Dan's right about the definition, at least the way it is in my head, but he is right about what's important because I might know what you feel. I might feel what you feel, but if I don't care about what you feel, none of that matters.
Right.
What matters, even if I'm not good at understanding and I'm good at emotionally feeling what you
Yes.
feel,
Yeah.
but I care about how you feel. And I think your book really resonates with me around that because it seems like there's a lot in what you just said in the beginnings, which is I understand more about you. I begin to care more about you.
Right.
And it isn't necessarily about remembering dates of birthdays of children or what you like to do as a hobby, but just something's happening with you. I care about you. Is there something I can do to help? Whether it's about work or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea that I might not be good at this. I might not even express it well. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the words are so critical, but the authenticity is.
Yes.
If it's real that I care about you, you'll feel that. And that matters.
Yes. Yeah. You stated that so well, Chuck. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think your book is a lot about how do you get there. I think there's a
Yes.
lot of tools that you offer that you provide. And I want to make this point because I look at your book and I think, boy, leaders are going to want to buy this book because it's going to give them information and ideas. Now, they still might want to coach because there's a lot in your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody wants I mean, who doesn't want somebody who listens to them and just is there
Right.
to advocate for them and to help them
Right.
and to be supportive? And
Right.
if they happen to be helpful in real time, that's even
Yes.
better.
Yes.
Can you use this as an individual? What if my leader's not interested in your book? Can I
Yeah.
buy your book and somehow show up in the workplace and make my team better, even if I'm not the leader?
Yes. Thank you for asking that, Chuck. And you've enlightened me to the idea that you can make a difference as an individual. When we talk about norms, uh, the way our brain is wired to pick up on what the team norms are. So, maybe some of your listeners can relate to what happens when you first walk into a new team, or you first join a team on Zoom that you haven't been part of before. I mean, you're looking to one another to figure out, how are things going to work here? What do we do here? Do we say hello? How do we interact here? Can we interrupt one another? How polite do we need to be? Subtle things and not so not subtle things. Um, and that's ongoing. And if team members want to build a more respectful environment, and again, like you said, there's tools, ways of thinking about that in the book, they can do it and it can have impact. So let me give you one example, that one of my favorites, and I write about this in the book, but just this idea of looking at people and nodding your head when they're talking,
Mm.
really letting them know that you value what they're saying, right? And really paying attention and asking follow-up questions, right? Asking someone a question is a way of letting them know that you value their knowledge, etc. And by the way, it's easier to do that once you get to know them, right? But anyway, um, that's the kind of thing. If you do that more often in a team, you can change the norms.
You do a wonderful job talking about how important belonging is. I remember you've made a presentation before the book in what I read in there, but also at the meetings that I've attended with you, where you talked about the research suggests how important it is to belong, but how do you make somebody who is sort of like, I mean, there's things that the kids are doing in schools now. They have a buddy bench. If you see somebody sitting alone, go sit with them, and people are encouraging kids to
Mm,
sit with them, and just
yeah.
to make people feel like they're not isolated, not ostracized, and that they're not that different, than they can be part of the school culture and the school teams. But the same thing in the workplace. How does somebody who isn't the leader necessarily invite other people to belong? And you make some statements around eh, share with them what you see as their contribution. Tell them how valuable they are when they do something right. Let them know how much you appreciate that they were willing to participate in what they shared was of value to you and how you use what they shared. So you provide, I think, lots of examples that obviously a leader can use in
Yes.
multiple ways. As a leader, I think it might be incredibly powerful, but I think it's still powerful even as a team member, sometimes maybe even more so, depending on the circumstance,
Hmm.
for a team member to go across to another team member who maybe is kind of quiet, maybe introverted, kind of sitting back, not necessarily willing to share, not knowing. When I first joined Exxon as a 30-some-year-old, I fit with certain people, and other
Sure.
people,
Sure.
this guy's kind of different than us. Doesn't
Yes.
seem to fit.
Yeah.
Some people maybe feel like I was really a big part of their team, other people not so much.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
This is a great story, Chuck. I really get it. Yeah.
So it's really interesting how different people make you feel. I remember I used to ride to work with somebody who had a similar job to me, but he had been there since forever, right? Right out of college. And he would tell me things. He would say he would just try to help me to find ways to fit in. And then he would tell me, he would always find something to say about me
Hmm.
that made me feel like he was glad I was there.
Wow, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's
I saw things like that in your book, though. I think there's lots of things that I saw that people can glean for themselves, that they can
hmm
take and start to do, even if they may not see it as their role. Sometimes you don't think it's your role necessarily to make the team feel like a team. You talk about a communal team. To me, that I was looking at those words and I
Yeah.
thought, boy, that's sort of like transactional and transformational almost.
hmm
I mean,
hmm
it seemed like similar to me, where because the team is transforming from a group to a team when people feel cared about and feel like it's a community, not
hmm
just a place I go every day and show up for a number of hours and then go home and don't think about it anymore.
Yes, that's an important distinction there between, communal teams and exchange teams. And I'll tell you, I struggled with how to discuss that in the book, because I didn't want anyone to assume that I was talking about building a commune,
That's a good
which it
point.
can sound like.
Yeah, I didn't go
But
there. Maybe somebody might. I don't know.
yeah, yeah, I really worried about that a lot. My editors told me not to worry about it, but um, those are two, relationship researchers came up with those two terms. And basically, exchange teams are we come in, we exchange information, and and then we leave. Whereas communal teams are where we're a little more invested in one another. We care about one another more, right? And that's what you need for collaboration, because collaboration, by the way, in other words, real teamwork. So let me make a distinction between cooperation and collaboration, which I'm not sure I do well in the book, but cooperation can happen by accident. It's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to help you out here. We'll do something together. Collaboration is much more intentional and it's harder. It requires me to pay attention to you and your needs. It requires me to build on your ideas, right? And to seek something that's different than what we all came in the room together with, right? So that's real teamwork. That's real teamwork. If we want to talk about what's the difference between a team and a group, when you've got shared goals, you really want to build a collaborative environment. So anyway, now I'm losing track of what I was thinking, but the point I want to make here is that if you want collaboration, you have to take people out of the individual selfish mentality that we tend to reward in organizations. We for most of our lives in school systems, et cetera, it's all about us. I mean, go to the anywhere, what are the big top selling books? Something I've been paying attention to a lot lately. And it's always about make yourself shine, how to be this way, have more grit, have more this or that, be the best you can be, and it's all this stuff. We're very individually focused, right? But what we don't teach people is the power of teamwork and how much better people are when they work together as a team. And so when we do want to work as a team, we have to let go of some of our individual needs. And the only way we're going to be motivated to let go of our selfish needs is if we know we're part of something and that people care about us and what goes around comes around in this place. Do
That's
you understand?
interesting. Yeah, I'm
That's a
actually
communal. Yeah, that's a communal environment. Let me say one more thing. Susan Fiske and others, Susan Fiske's a social psychologist who's now at Princeton. Other psychologists who study groups have a term they call motivated tacticians. And that's what we tend to have in teams. People who are motivated tacticians. So when you talk about those leadership teams where everybody's out for themselves, they're not aligned, it's motivated tacticians that get us up to a certain point. We need to get rid of that armor. We need to show people that working together is better for all of us. And that's what the great teams do. They build that kind of communal environment and and they help one another succeed individually as well.
Mm. So, we both know Richard Boyatzis was written about intentional change theory and about being the best possible version of yourself. And I mean, I've actually before I met Richard I had been working along those lines because I'd learned that years ago at Harvard Business School about this idea of a compelling vision of the future.
Yes,
And so the compelling vision of the future from your book isn't about the best version of myself, it's the best version of the team I'm on.
yes, yes. And again, we can create that if we work together. And it requires a conversation. It requires the leader to let go a little bit of control, which is why it's much easier for emotionally intelligent leaders to build emotionally intelligent teams because it's hard to be a leader and controlling feels easier often.
So one of the questions that comes up in your that you address in the book and comes up in real life is, what do you do with conflict when all these great teams that are working together? How do you manage conflict in a way that maintains people's dignity? How do you hold people accountable without making them feel embarrassed? Or, I mean, there's all kinds of things that come up that are problems with interpersonal relationships that are problems in work and out of work, and not people and people learn things from their parents, they learn things from their friends, they learn things from their experience, and sometimes they learn things through academia and some version of education that they have. But people struggle a lot with these things, and you have some really nice ideas, I think, that you share in your book. Would you care to share a few of them?
Sure. the first thing I want to say is that you have to start with the idea that conflict is a natural part of teamwork. And it's just like it's a natural part of any relationship, right? Um, and so you don't want to avoid it. And in fact, conflict forces people to think harder, to get clearer about things. And so I've been with a lot of teams where I'm the one that's trying to get them to let go and have more conflict because they worry about their relationships. They worry about turning someone off to something, hurting their career. They worry about, the repercussions of that kind of, looking a certain way in the room, what have you. And so one of the reasons why you have to build good relationships, that first bucket about getting to know one another, building a sense of belonging, is that you want to make the relationships a little more secure so that you can encourage the differences to come out. And the next thing, the only other thing I can say at the moment, is that after the conflict, you better make time to repair it. So you bring the group back together and you thank them or the two people or the whoever was involved in it, and you say, "Cool, let's see figure out what we've learned from this. Let's talk about how we're going to repair our relationships now because that might have been difficult for people. Was it difficult? Because we want to be able to have conflict again in the future." Teams that don't have conflict, coming back to your forming, storming, norming, performing, you were talking about Tuckman's model of development. If you don't have at least some storming, you don't get a lot of clarity, you don't get a lot of difference, and you get groupthink. You've got to allow those conversations to happen. You've got to set up for that. And part of that's developing relationships in the beginning. Part of that is allowing the conflict to happen. Part of the, I think, is the repair at the end. This is what I found in teams. This is what I see the good teams doing. Maybe there's more in there that you saw in the book, Chuck, that I haven't tapped into now, or you have more thoughts yourself on this topic. It's an important
No,
one.
you had some things that, you talked about the ways that you had people learn about, you asked questions of what's the best way to manage a conflict with you. I mean, proactively
Yes,
addressing,
yes,
you had a whole series of questions that, what's the best way to communicate with you? What are some things that
yes,
you think that you bring to the table? What are
yes,
some things that you don't know that you'd like to learn, but you're not good at right now? Or you had a whole bunch of questions that I thought really promoted people being more thoughtful. And by the way, this is from the work that I've done over the years on this emotion roadmap, I'm very focused on when people don't feel the way they want to feel, when a
yes,
team doesn't feel the way it wants to feel, how
yeah.
would you like everybody to feel? And it's not the same for each person.
No.
Clearly, we start with if it's me I'm trying to change, and that's all I really know well. And even
Yeah.
that, I don't know that well necessarily, but maybe I know me as well as I know anybody.
Hmm.
So I'm going to approach it as if it was me that I'm trying to get you to feel like it's okay, whatever it was that just happened between us. But I think it starts with knowing what you would say to yourself. But
Yeah.
then you got to look and say, well, yeah, but how is Vanessa different than me?
Right.
Because if she's different than me, what I might say to me, it may not work here. What do I know about her? And then you talk about style issues and the way people might communicate with each other and the different kinds of people that you're going to run into. You might have
Yes.
somebody very introverted that doesn't want to share in a meeting or isn't
Yes.
comfortable in a conflict, not at least not in a group setting.
Yep. Yep.
So all those things are part of what I read when I read your book, and I thought
Yeah.
these are all things that are going to be helpful to people. I think as you're thinking
Yes.
about what can I do? I'm not the leader of this large, even if I am a leader in the organization, my boss isn't easy. So he may not want me to be like this. I mean,
Right.
one of the sports, and I will say this, one of the sports people you talk about is Pete Carroll.
Yes.
Now, as a Patriots fan over the years, Pete Carroll coached Patriots, the New
Hmm.
England Patriots.
Yep.
So did Bill Belichick.
Yep.
Bill Belichick wasn't about caring about
No,
people.
he wasn't.
And yet Bill Belichick won a lot of championships. Pete
Yes,
Carroll
he
didn't.
did.
So
Yes, he did.
he went out in Seattle when he made it work out there. But
Yeah.
so, so I think people can win different ways.
Yes, they can. But I would
Um,
also say Tom Brady was in there with Belichick, and I think he did care about people.
and I think Tom Brady made it work.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, I mean,
Anyway,
people will argue
that's a
about
whole other
that, but
conversation, but yeah.
Right. But that's the point about an individual that
Yes,
isn't the coach
yes,
that can make something work though. I think that does illustrate the point that as a team member,
yes,
Tom was willing to sacrifice salary so that he could
yes,
have good linemen, to
yes.
protecting him. And he had good receivers that he could throw to.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
He
too many people
understood
will
that
do that.
the team makes the individual, you know. So often we think it's the individual makes the team, but he really understood that. But I just want to follow up on something that you said, which is really you're talking about this exercise that I recommend that you go through when you're building your relationships, in fact, if we are going to give you feedback, if there is going to be conflict, how do you feel about that? How would you prefer it to be, right? It's a great question. It reminds me of, I mean, I really learned that for the first time many years ago when I read a book by Marcus Buckingham called Break All the Rules. And he and his Gallup team went out and talked to leaders to find out what some of the great leaders did differently. And they opened the book with an anecdote of this one leader who said, "Oh, well, you got to treat everybody the way they want to be treated." He said, "There's this one employee who I've had to fire 3 times in order to get his attention, and there's this other employee who, if I just look at her the wrong way or raise my voice, it's going to crush her. So I got to treat her this way." And it's just a beautiful description of really the platinum rule, which is you don't have to treat everyone the same. Everyone's different. And this is one of the great paradoxes in teams, which is that you do need norms. And this is another reason why you got to adapt your norms. But at the same time, your norms need to value the individual needs in the room.
Well, you also talk about external stakeholders, and I'd like to give you just a few minutes to just to touch base on that because that's another part of the book.
First person who raised the idea that team building forgets how important external stakeholders are was a woman named Deborah Ancona at MIT. I don't know if you know anything about
I
her.
do know Deborah, yeah.
Oh, you do? Great. And she rocked the world of team researchers with her idea that, great teams send ambassadors out and they bring in new ideas and they get information, especially information about your clients or your customers. Um, but what she also raised is something that we found in our research, which is that there can be a tension between the internal dynamics and reaching out. If you reach out too often, you tend to, I mean, you don't have limitless time. If everybody's reaching out too often, then they're ignoring the importance of building that collaborative environment, that emotionally intelligent environment. That comes at a cost. And so the real task is balancing it. And one of my favorite ways of doing that is having a team create stakeholder analysis worksheet, which is an idea I got from some colleagues of mine, where you basically list who are your stakeholders or who are thought leaders out in the world that could help you solve some of the issues that they don't even need to be in your current orbit in your industry. Who are people that you can go out and get ideas from? But anyway, you make that list and then you assign people to be the ambassador. Bring back the information. What do you learn? And this, by the way, there is so much data coming out now showing how important that is to innovation in teams. And in a most recent paper that's coming out, in fact, I think it's coming out in Harvard Business Review as we speak, talks about how important it is to go out, get that information, come back, and reflect on it. That if you just got a fire hose of information coming in, it's not that helpful. But if you use it for your reflection time, it's you teams make the most of it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so these are people that might be customers, but they also just might be thought leaders in the field that you're working in. But you have a way of analyzing it too, so that it does lead to creativity in the workplace. And also, it may be creativity around products and services that you're delivering, or even about best practices around teams and being a team.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you're at the University of New Hampshire, but you want to say a little bit about the classroom and the classes that you teach there?
Sure. So I teach in the business school here. I'm a psychologist, right? But I teach in the business school. We have a small business school. We're 60 miles north of Boston, and I teach mostly what a course called organizational behavior, which I'm sure you are familiar with from Harvard. And it's basically behavior in the workplace, which is my favorite topic. And I've taught it to MBAs, executive MBAs, undergraduates. I've taught it to non-business majors, which is also a great group to work with. And I also teach leadership and team building classes. So uh, great to work with young people.
So, okay, that's so you're a little bit more about you. And then you want to tell people one more time about where they can get your book. And the name of the book is The Emotionally Intelligent Team. It's going to be out in just a few days, right?
Yes, indeed. Comes out on July 22nd. And it's you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on and Barnes and Noble, anywhere where you go online or anywhere you physically go, you can get it at your local bookstore. I've and if you can't find a copy at your local bookstore, go to my website. There's a lot of information on my website, including we're just now putting a bunch of resources on that website. I've got my daughter helping me do this, and I know you have daughters, so you can imagine how lovely that is for me.
Yeah.
And that is the website is vanessadruskat.com. And I'd love to have people visit it and or
And
connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a
uh,
huge LinkedIn fan and I'm on there.
okay, and Vanessa Druskat, Druskat, Druskat.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, and it's .com. So vanessadruskat.com. And you have an assessment, a team assessment there as well, right? Now, how do
Yes.
people, now it's in your book too. Yeah, you have a
Mhm.
version of it in your book as well. Tell us a little bit about the team assessment, because I think that's an important part that I didn't get to, and I'd like to leave with that information.
You bet. I put in the book what I consider the quick and dirty assessment, which basically lists the norms, and it's a great conversation starter. When I run workshops, day long, half day long workshops with leaders, I give them that assessment so they can assess the norms in their team. But we also have sort of a full-blown, a bigger assessment that we've been using. It was originally the survey that we used to collect a lot of data. And several people encouraged us to put it online and to develop an accreditation program and help people learn how to use it. And it's the survey we use when we coach teams. So basically, what we usually do when we coach teams is we start off with this survey that gives you scores and ranges on items that can tell you how well you're doing on each of the norms. So, for example, the norm about understanding team members, do you do you understand what you need to know about the people in this team? Do you take actions to understand? Questions like that. But what I like about that survey is the range. So inevitably, we find that there are high status people that feel known and that there are people who are lower status who don't feel known. And so the conversation then becomes not only about where you stand, where the mean is, or where do you stand on a 1 to 5 scale, but what's the range? Because I can tell you that researchers are not allowed to even call you a team if there are if the range is too long because people are having very different experiences and your norms are not strong enough. If you don't have
That's
strong enough
interesting.
norms, we don't call you a team, we call you a group.
Okay. Well, this has been great. Thank you. I
Yeah.
want to thank you, Vanessa. I just want to make the point. Those of you that have listened to me again, I'm an expert myself in the field of emotional intelligence, known for something called emotion roadmap. And one of the things that I advocate is if you're not feeling the way you want to feel, that a key question you ask yourself is how would I like to feel? So, given an assessment like Vanessa's, and you see your team isn't feeling the way you'd like them to feel, what can you do to make everybody feel that way? And one of the things that has come out in that article I shared with you earlier, Vanessa, that I sent to you was people said things when I worked with teams. I want to feel proud.
Yeah.
I want to feel like I belong. I
Yes.
want to feel appreciated, valued, respected. And to me, it's so interesting because in my own mind, I've begun talking about shared feelings. I know shared values has been a big conversation for years in organizations, but I think about the word respect, which you use a lot in the book.
Hmm.
And I think about if somebody knows that respect is a value in their company, it's nice that they know that. A lot of times people don't know what their shared values are,
Yes.
interestingly.
Indeed.
But if you ask them, well, do you feel respected?
Mm.
And as a representative of this organization, either internally with other people or externally with customers or vendors, whoever, are you respectful? It's a whole
Right.
different conversation.
Yes.
And so I've been working very hard to promote the concept that shared feelings really matter. And I
Yes.
think if you want the kind of feelings that create a group of people to feel like a team, your book would be an excellent starting point, if not an end point as well. So
Thank you.
thank you for
Thank you.
joining me on this interview, and I hope everybody buys your book. I think they'll benefit from it.
Thank you, Chuck. And it's been my pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you for inviting me.